Hey guys, it's Nature Nate. Before we start the episode, just wanted to say I hope you're all well, hope you're safe. We wanted to share a little bit more about our sponsor who's trying to help the world right now with their work. This pandemic has affected everyone. To get through this, we all need to work together. Cypress River Advisors, with their deep cross-border sourcing and manufacturing knowledge, are providing PPEs for free to medical professionals and communities in need. They're providing protective equipment in New York, California, Michigan, and Japan. They're also providing data visualizations to help make policymakers and the public understand the real impacts of the pandemic. For more information, go to cypressriveradvisors.com/COVID-19. All right, now on to the episode. Blue. Blue is trending these days. Blue checks, blue lines. You know what's not trending though? The big blue ocean. That's right. We don't think about the ocean very much with climate change, with fires, with elections. We don't think about the sea, but I do because I study it. And how did I come to study the ocean? Well, that started at the Monterey Institute. And there I learned from a great Jedi ocean master, the person who baptized me into the world of ocean economics, Jason Scorse. Or just Jason.
You know, a lot going on, and obviously 2020, a big year. Gonna try to defeat the zombie hordes here and get some sanity back in America.
Jason's a pretty cool dude. I first heard about him through his TEDx talk where he talked about how surfing might give ocean waves an economic value and lead to their conservation. That's crazy. He's the program chair of international environmental policy at what is now called the Middlebury Institute of International Studies. While I was there, I got my master's in international environmental policy with a concentration in ocean and coastal resources management. So as we like to say, I'm a Miss IEP OCRM. Obvi. When I went to the US, I wanted to talk to Jason because I wanted to go back to my roots of not just understanding the ocean, but thinking about the way we talk about the ocean. Let's be real. Nobody cares about the sea. It never comes up. It wasn't mentioned in any election. However, it's probably the most important thing on our planet. Every other breath you take comes from the sea. 500 million people depend on the protein from coral alone. And of course, there's energy, offshore wind, and previously offshore oil. But we don't think about the ocean, and that's a huge mistake. So Jason Scorse, also leads the Center for the Blue Economy. The center is, I dare say, unique in that it studies the economic impact of the ocean. They work with government agencies, and they're sort of a repository of ocean economic data. And the Center for the Blue Economy has been working on the Ocean Climate Action Plan, the OCAP, or in other words, the Blue New Deal. It wants to do two things. One, to use ocean and coastal resources to mitigate greenhouse gas emissions. And two, to help coastal communities to equitably adapt to climate change impacts. And if you think about the impacts on the ocean, think about sea level rise. Think about typhoons and hurricanes, how we can use habitats like mangroves and seagrasses and coral reefs to help protect us from those impacts of climate change. You know, the Ocean Climate Action Plan and the Center for the Blue Economy is interesting, but that's not the only reason I wanted to talk to Jason, because Jason is, in essence, a great communicator.
Just that term alone. Once you say environmentalist, then there's somebody who's not an environmentalist, right? And that's absurd.
He has a podcast called Dispatch from the Zombie Apocalypse, and the way that Jason communicated environmental topics. It wasn't just, well, the science says that the ocean is important. No, he unequivocally stated what the facts supported. And one quote I remember that I've stuck with for the rest of my life is that you don't have to lie when you have the truth on your side. You don't have to exaggerate how good something is for the environment. You just have to truthfully tell people what the science says. Jason and I spent the rest of our conversation talking about veganism, how to unite Americans. This was also pre-COVID, by the way, so some of these things might sound a little wonky. This was in February, right before the apocalypse. But I think that the things that we said back then are prescient, even now, and Jason was and is a great source of knowledge. Play the tape. So, how are you doing, Jason?
Doing great. You know, good to see you, Nate. It's been many years, and glad you could come back stateside. So looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, it's been 5 years. So what have you been doing? What have you been doing the past 5 years?
Yeah, so the center, is about 9 years old right now. Center for the Blue Economy, which I direct here in Monterey. we've been really ramping up our research program, and I have a big new initiative it's called the Ocean Climate Action Plan. When it comes to fruition, it'll be the first ocean climate policy at the federal level in the United States. So that's really taking up the bulk of my time right now. I started a little plant-based vegan food company with another former student. A lot going on, and obviously 2020, a big year. Going to try to defeat the zombie hordes here and get some sanity back in America. But it's going to be a tough haul.
So you're just tackling the easy problems.
Exactly.
It sounds like you're just going the easy, low-hanging fruit sort of thing.
Exactly.
Let's start with ocean. So I don't think most listeners are probably aware of U.S. ocean policy to that extent. Maybe they know about marine protected areas, but certainly they don't know what it was like before Trump, maybe what it's like now. So since you're pretty close to this, what's kind of happened in the past 4 years? I assume we've gone backwards, but like, what have you seen? Because you're working on the ocean climate plan, so that's a good sign. But
so I'll say a couple points. Well, the first is, John Kerry started kind of big U.S. leadership in oceans, which really hadn't been there. I definitely wasn't there under the Bush administration. Even Clinton administration wasn't. So we have not, again, as you know, we haven't signed the Law of the Sea. U.S. has been pretty limited in ocean policy internationally. So Kerry changed that. We had this Our Oceans Conference, which was in D.C. 2 years. It was in 2014 and 2016. It was down in Chile in 2015. And when I went in 2016, Kerry was very brilliant at kind of bringing people here to one-up themselves. So he would have this point. So there's a small room in the State Department, it's 200 people. And he'd say, okay, the finance minister from Brazil is now going to talk about this new, and we're pledging, X billions of dollars, and we're going to have the biggest Latin American, marine protected area. And then you go, and now I have the minister of, and so they'd all kind of one-up themselves, and it would be all trending on Twitter and everything. And by the end of this hour of kind of finance ministers and environmental ministers, we had doubled the amount of marine protected areas in the world. So it was very kind of your behavioral economics of have everybody go for the, who can best everybody on the international stage.
A good auction, basically.
Exactly.
Like an auction of public goods and protecting them.
Yeah, that's a great way of saying it. And then Obama presented to us, and I have actually video of me yelling 4 more years, and he smiled. So that's like probably the peak of my career. But here we are, September 2016. It's the 3rd year of this international movement. And, this is before everything goes dark, 2 months later. But it was really the pinnacle. And, Trump's presidency, in many ways, is just the negation of Obama. He has no affirmative agenda. It's basically destroy, 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 but destroy with anything that Obama did, he wants to undo. So that being said, the Trump administration, to the extent that it has a strategy or a policy on oceans, it's anything that's jobs, right? So where does that leave us? They're interested in aquaculture. Now, they're interested in mostly the bad aquaculture, the big, huge pens of fish aquaculture.
Like fish mining, industrial sea, antibiotics, just fish poop,
anything bad is pretty much what he's into. But that being said, there's a window there for doing aquaculture well and kind of getting it in on the agenda. So part of our Ocean Climate Action Plan is sustainable aquaculture, particularly shellfish and sea vegetable aquaculture. So the Trumps, he wanted to push offshore drilling, but interestingly, a lot of Republican governors in coastal states don't want to see offshore oil development. And so that's actually bipartisan. So what I'm kind of get at here is, as much as the Trump administration has been absolutely horrific on everything to do with the environment and will continue to be, the Republican leadership at the more local and state level is not nearly as bad. I talked to people in Louisiana, they're losing a football field, an hour is falling into the ocean. So when that's happening, you can't deny climate change. But the point being is, we're trying to look for the angles where the Trump administration's macro plan allows for maybe so in the aquaculture, in maybe offshore wind. There's actually some Republicans interested in that. So we have a pretty comprehensive plan. We're looking at greening the ports and the maritime sector of the United States. The ports sector in the United States right now is the point source of a lot of air pollution for major cities in the U.S. And you have low-income minority communities who live next to them, adjacent to them, who are bearing the brunt of this.
These are container vessels, right? This is like they're burning the bunker fuel, sort of like the nasty tar, and they're not turning off their engines when they come into port, right?
And then the trucks that are idling and lining up to go and get the cargo to bring inland. So that's tricky. We're also looking at living shorelines. This is something, again, pro-jobs, blue growth, coastal restoration. That could be hundreds of thousands of jobs. The scientists, the planners, the nurseries, the actual people going out and planting and then monitoring. And what I like to say too is, look, I get it that not everybody, in fact, 70% of Americans don't have any college education, right? So it's high school degree. You're thinking about working in a plant or a manufacturing facility, but I say, wouldn't it be nice to be a coastal restoration expert where you spend your time in the beach and dunes and you're fixing up and planting all these new wetland systems and all this? Wouldn't you like to do that relative to being in a coal mine or in a factory floor, right?
This is sounding sort of like a New Deal situation, right? Like you could employ all these people. Is this like, the Green New Deal came out. Is there like a Blue New Deal that we could maybe...
It's funny you say that. There is. We actually called our plan putting the Blue in the Green New Deal or the Blue New Deal. Then kind of Elizabeth Warren's team kind of took our ideas and actually came out with the Blue New Deal. So if she is the nominee for president, we'll work with her. And so also, because Blue New Deal then gets associated with Green New Deal, Republicans don't want to do it, right? Republicans can't be attached to anything that's, quote, partisan. So we called it Ocean Climate Action Plan to make it more nonpartisan, but it is kind of in that space of kind of Blue New Deal.
Got it. So it's that kind of like marketing element there. So you're working on ocean economics, ocean policy. I remember watching your TED talk where you talked about surfing economics and how an ocean wave could have value. So what have you found with surfing economics? Have you found anything new in the past couple of years?
Any environmental resource, its value can be manifested in many ways. Two primary ways to think about it is people come to areas to surf. They spend money on surf shops. They spend money on hotels. They spend money on restaurants. They spend money on all the kind of secondary services that are associated with tourism. Plus, again, these things that are unique to surfing, like surf shops or surf lessons or that kind of stuff. The second, though, that's a little bigger is to the extent that surfing is a high-end, really intense activity that has a really devoted base, places that are near surf spots, the real estate values are probably inflated. So the way, here we are, we're in Santa Cruz County, which is Surf City, United States. This is probably the highest it is the highest per capita of pro surfers come out of this county, of the entire United States. Very, very famous. If we woke up tomorrow and all the surf breaks were destroyed, the real estate values of Santa Cruz would drop significantly because a lot of people spend a lot of money on housing here because they want to be near the surf. So we did some studies, me and some students at the center. That was the first to look at how are real estate values impacted by surfing. And we found basically that the key surf breaks in Santa Cruz probably lead to about $100,000 of higher real estate values for the ones that are kind of within that range. And again, basically, it's hundreds of millions of dollars of real estate in Santa Cruz is directly related to surfing. And then secondarily, property tax revenue from that every year is also millions and millions of dollars. You extend that over California, it's probably billions. So a lot of the value of surfing is you're a house near a surf break, it's going to be a lot more valuable to you.
So to me, this is just really clear evidence that nature has potent economic values. It really does affect our lives. But I guess, as you're saying all this, something that's interesting to me is, you're from New York, you're from Manhattan. How did you get so into the ocean? How did you kind of come to all these conclusions about nature, about your connection to it? Because whenever I'm in Manhattan, I don't feel close to nature at all.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was really lucky. I live near Central Park, which is the best urban park in the entire world. So I always had this really juxtaposition. I think I really am fortunate. Even here in Santa Cruz, I can live a real kind of, I'm always talking to people up in San Francisco or Berkeley or in San Jose, but yet then I can jump in the water and be surfing or something like that. So I've always gone for this. And I think that's the future of kind of, as we urbanize the world, which, again, I think it was a few years ago, it was more than 50% of humans live in cities for the first time in human history. We're going to need to integrate more and more natural systems. And so the oceans, and I went out to Long Island, I went out to New Jersey, Jersey Shore, when it was cool, before the reality TV shows came. Before all that, so I've always had this kind of thing of really bringing the urban and the nature kind of as two sides of the same coin.
Okay, and then you were doing that, you were seeing this connection, this contrast, and then you came to Middlebury Institute now, formerly the Monterey Institute, and then you set up the Center for the Blue Economy. How did you
decide to do that? Why did you want to do that?
Well, so as all of these things are in terms of nonprofits, it's not just your own vision, but is there funders, right? And so we were very fortunate. The Middlebury universe has some really great environmental. It has one of the first environmental studies undergraduate programs in the United States. There was a family that had Middlebury students that came from the Star-Kissed tuna fortune.
Oh, okay.
Right. So their grandparents were the people who started the Star-Kissed tuna. And I think both because they had a family foundation that was linked to oceans, but also because their fortune had come from an extract of the ocean. And they really wanted to do something more on the sustainability and kind of more the conservation of the ocean. And since they had Middlebury children and we had the National Ocean Economics Program, they wanted to do something that was more bigger research, conservation, and brought students in. And so it was just kind of like everything in life, or most things in life, it's a kind of a combination, or that Mark Twain, of preparation plus being ready for people who have money to do something.
Yeah, when preparation meets opportunity,
Right,
that's
exactly.
luck.
You filled it in for me.
I say that a
Maybe
lot.
it's not Mark Twain, but it's someone.
It's just a great, American wisdom from the land, maybe.
Yeah. And that's really the story of my life.
So you mentioned tuna, and I feel like that's kind of a trigger word. And people ask me a lot, like, what can I eat? What's like a safe seafood? And I think you have some thoughts about if there is even safe seafood.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on that. So the first thing I wanted to say is, what can I eat? My whole orientation is I'm never telling people what to do, right? So people can eat whatever they want to eat. And in fact, I've been plant-based vegan for 30 years, and I'll be at events, and people say, oh, you can't eat that. And I'll say, no, I can eat whatever I want. I don't want to eat that, right? I choose not. And that orientation is a big starting point, though, because food is the most intense cultural aspect of someone's life. Just on the psychology here, as a little digression, the things people really love are linked to things that have big resonance with foods that they ate with their mother and father when they were very little. So if you could trace the foods that you love, that you really feel like this is the stuff I love, 9 out of 10 times it's because your mom cooked it for you, or your grandma gave it to you when you visited her, or it was a family gathering and that was what everyone ate. The reality is, food and taste is not genetic, it's socially constructed. It's socially constructed to such a level that you can change the language and the orientation, the imagery, and make people actually either like food or be disgusted by food. So literally it's
like the cultural setting in which you eat that food. So if you had like Thanksgiving dinner, but you took out all the American food and you put in like fried rice and noodles and, roasted pork, people are like, oh yeah, okay. Yeah.
Absolutely. And again, I want to emphasize this. We think we have a taste buds, right? Some people hate mushrooms or, they hate a
Brussels sprouts are evil.
Right, something like that. All socially constructed. To the extent that that very sophisticated social psychologists can change a few words, create a whole thing, and actually make individuals enjoy foods they thought they didn't enjoy, and make them be disgusted by foods that they thought they loved. So my point is, this is very, very fluid, very variable. And that's why I think the way we talk about food matters. That being said, coming back to your question about tuna and seafood and food more broadly, tuna on land would be the equivalent of a mountain gorilla or a lion, right? These are endangered species.
Predators, powerful beasts.
High trophic. These things are not sustainable at the level of modern consumption, right? The beautiful thing is the plant-based world, the kind of substitutes, is the highest and most developed in Asia. So I love traveling to Asia because there's a Buddhist kind of tradition that's hundreds of years old of real intense kind of mock meats that are plant-based. And they are almost to the T identical in texture and flavor.
What's really interesting too is that, I'll just speak for Taiwan, but people in Taiwan, when there's a death in the family, they will sometimes be vegan for a month. Well, I mean, they'll be vegetarian, but they're just kind of de facto vegan because nobody eats cheese, nobody drinks milk.
Dairy, yeah.
And what's funny too is you kind of start to lose your lactose intolerance. So now whenever I come back to the US, I always feel sick for a couple of days because there's just like cream and dairy and just put into everything. But it's not weird for someone to be vegan. And in Taiwan, it's not weird to say, oh, I have this dietary preference, because even things like onion and chilies in certain Buddhist sects, they won't eat those because that's this like fire food that they don't want to eat. So it's funny to kind of connect that to this cultural setting, because even if you transplant yourself into a different culture, your sensibilities about food change. And I come back to the US and I feel like just bloated and gross because every meal is so gigantic compared to what I eat in Asia. And I'm a big guy and I can sustain myself.
Right.
So what you're saying with fish is that tuna is this super powerful predator. We should not be eating that all the time. And then now there are plant-based alternatives that are great. If we can change the cultural conversation around food, we can get people to eat plant-based alternatives commonly because they'll have a different framework for doing that.
All right, we're gonna take a quick break. We were just talking about tuna and surfing and BJs, that's blue jobs. Things that are kind of important for our society, in case you didn't know. And before we get back to the show, I just wanna highlight that what I really appreciate about the Ocean Climate Action Plan, OCAP, is that it specifically mentions the disproportionate impacts that lower income and coastal communities experience from climate change and makes that foundational with what its agenda is trying to achieve. Similar to the Green New Deal, similar to bringing to light the inequalities between Black, Indigenous people of color that they experience from climate change. Inuit populations in Alaska are already being displaced, and in general, Indigenous and First Nations communities are the ones who are first affected by climate change. If you want to know more about issues of climate justice and the injustices within conservation affecting specifically Indigenous people, our researcher Alicia wrote an article on how conservationists historically have failed miserably to honor and respect the original owners of the land. So if you like what Jason is doing with OCAP and you care about equity and you care about Indigenous people, which you probably should, you can go check out wastenotwhynot.substack.com and check out her new article. And now we're back with our conversation with Jason. In the next part, we're going to talk about science education, podcasting, and how we should create an ethic that will serve us into the future. And I will not make any more jokes about BJs.
So when I was in Taiwan doing ocean economics research, the coral reefs have tremendous economic value, but then when you try and tell that to a fisherman, they're like, well, where's my cash? So I guess what I'm asking is, do you have any strategies, or what do you think? How do you talk to people about ocean economics? How do you kind of break this argument that we have to sacrifice nature for economic development? Because I feel like that's still pernicious to this day. And I feel like even environmental supporters kind of fall into that argument.
Yeah, those kind of false dichotomies. I'll just say, to take a step back, one thing, and this is going to be a long generational thing, and I think environmentalists, just that term alone, once you say environmentalist, then there's somebody who's not an environmentalist, right? And that just is an absurdity, right? I like to say, who doesn't like clean air? Who doesn't like clean water? Who doesn't like trees? Who doesn't like beautiful food? So again, there is nobody who's not environmentalist. And we have, unfortunately, worked ourselves into this bifurcation with as an environmentalist and a non. It's an absurdity, right? Even just value of nature. The human system is a subset of the natural system, not the other way around. It's not the way we've structured it. There's an economic system and then nature's a subset of that. That's absurd. It doesn't make any sense scientifically, ethically, ecologically. But that's the kind of world we're in. It's going to take many generations to kind of reorient ourselves to a more, I'd say, sane view of kind of us in the ecological system. But that being said, in this interim period where we're still in a very kind of weird economic world where we think nature's a subset of our economy and not the other way around, it's just a lot of economic techniques to show people. So again, let's put it in ocean view. You take a house on the coast that has its view blocked. So there's some trees in the way, can't see the ocean. Take that exact same house and it has an unobstructed ocean view. The value of that house is $1 to $2 million higher just to be able to look out at the blue.
Just to see water,
just to see
you're
it.
Slightly richer.
You're significantly richer, right?
Okay.
1 to 2 million just for the view. We extended it out. We said, okay, here we are in Santa Cruz, California. There's beautiful houses up in the woods that have the redwoods. So we took houses that have views of beautiful mountain ranges up in, a few miles inland. And then versus those that have that view, but then that little slip of blue, but you're miles away. So you're not on the water, but you have that little slip. And some people said maybe that's no big difference, because if you don't have the blue, you're still looking out at this beautiful valley of redwood. Turns out it's still $250,000 for just that little thin strip in addition to the trees. So the point being is the ocean, nature have incredible value for real estate, for tourism, obviously for natural resources. And now we're also being near water, being near nature. This is good for mental health. This is good for stress reduction. And more we're realizing that stress is probably the biggest vector for disease. And so anything in nature and natural systems, whether you're in an urban or a place like this, trees, green space, flowers, nice, beautiful scents of herbs, just those things dramatically reduce your stress levels, which then dramatically improve your health. So those are kind of the vectors that I try to get at for the kind of more people who haven't studied this stuff.
So we were just at the American Association for the Advancement of Sciences, really stumble over that, AAAS. And it really dawned on me being there that there is such a need for people to interpret scientific research and data. And how did you decide to become a teacher? How did you kind of decide, yes, this is what I want to do? And then you've been a teacher for how long now?
I mean, if you add it all up, about 20 years.
20 years. What was there like a day where you decided that you wanted to teach? Because I feel like, just as like a little more context, I feel like in the environmental movement, there's this sort of like, are you like an activist? Are you like chaining yourself to the pipelines? Are you, or are you in business kind of trying to turn it from within? Are you in government as a regulator? Or are you a teacher kind of making the next generation? And I feel like at least with my peer group, there was this sense of let's go do it. Let's go do the stuff. What was there anything that made you kind of decide to do? I mean, you do things as well, but to focus on teaching.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, unfortunately, I have none of those kind of aha catalytic light bulb kind of going on moments at all in my life. My life has really been a much more of a kind of it's kind of an evolution, kind of organic process. It's definitely the boring view. And I've always been actually really jealous of the people who are like, when I was 6, I had this thing and I saw this thing. And then from there on I wanted, or people who are musicians or artists who are just like, it's in their blood. I had to do it. I don't have that genetic makeup. It's just been a much more over time. But that being said, it comes in my family. My mom was a teacher. My dad was, a teacher at the graduate level. And so what I've always wanted to be, I've always been into the kind of, this is a social process. I like being around people. I like interacting with people. I like engaging people, especially on kind of a more sophisticated, deep level. And from the educational standpoint, as a professor, I like helping people launch their careers and catalyzing that. That's probably the most, I'd say rewarding thing about being a professor. I've been, almost 20 years now, is that, it's hundreds and hundreds of students around the world, it's international, that I can say, even if I had a little tiny bit, a little couple percent view of their future that I help to contribute to, that's a rewarding. And I really like that. So that's probably more of a, that's where it came from.
Okay. And you also, you do that now with a podcast. You have your own podcast, and in that you talk about politics and sort of like how to live in this post-Trump world. Is there anything in that you want to share? How do you guide? What do we do?
Yeah, sure. I mean, again, the podcast, for those of interested, it's Dispatch from the Zombie Apocalypse. I got that. I was literally, I thought about it. It was a month before the election in 2016. I said, you know what? If Trump wins, we're full on in this zombie apocalypse of insanity. I'm going to talk about how do we move beyond? What is going on? How do we engage? How do we think about that? What is the Trump era going to mean, and how do we get out of it? And so it's all been about, again, a lot of times I'll interview people. I've had a lot of good. I had Bill McKibben. I've had people who do artificial intelligence. I've had people who are trying to understand Republicans. I've had people on the plant-based kind of vegan world. I've talked to people on that. So it's been pretty cool. And it's been a pretty good thing because, again, obviously most of my listeners are not Trump supporters. They're more on the liberal end of things. And something underlying it for those who are thinking about U.S. politics, the key thing is to always remember is that the Trumps, the kind of the fascists, all these things, all these people never win a majority in any advanced society. It is always because people on the left have somehow been divided and have somehow let them into power. And so a lot of my thing is about how do we unify the left? how do we always continue to try to realize that it's us as a kind of divided polity that has allowed these things to come in, and how do we kind of overcome that?
So, given what you said about people who kind of value a social safety net, who value society as a whole, are more often than not the majority in most countries, maybe kind of like a silent majority or whatever. Something that I think about a lot lately is Earth Day. We launched our podcast on Earth Day. It's 50 years since Earth Day, and Earth Day was one of the largest protests in US history. And to me, it feels like, we said earlier, environmentalists are everywhere. How do we make that majority? I mean, this podcast also is not targeting people who are fascists, I'm not trying to deprogram anyone. More people who are sympathetic, who are interested, but they don't know how to maybe leap ahead, or they don't think about this unity concept. And we're going into the US democratic elections right now. Other countries are also having their elections and making this choice. How do we bring people together when it feels like there's also big areas of disagreement, just to talk about people who are, let's say, interested in environmental policies. Cap and trade lately has been a major source of contention. The Green New Deal as a concept has been a major source of contention between ecologically focused people. So how do we bring about this unity? Have you found any cool tips to bring people together?
Yeah. Well, what I've been really inspired by, I have to say, in the United States is really the young people, whether it's kind of Sunrise Movement, whether it's 350.org, whether it's Justice Democrats. There's this kind of sense in the US that I'm trying to kind of incorporate into my own thinking, which is there is nobody we're waiting for. There is nobody that's about to do it. It has to be us. It's like fill the void. Do it yourself. And really that's this Ocean Climate Action Plan that I started with. The Green New Deal came out. It's a 14-page resolution. I read it. It mentions the oceans once. The Green New Deal is an incredible document. It's an incredible movement. But as most things environment, it's typically a terrestrial focus. Your kind of traditional conservationist, your kind of solar panels and wind, the ocean is always an afterthought. So taking what I just said as a logic, I said, okay, fill the void. Let's talk to all the ocean leaders and let's fill that in. Let's be the people to think about, if we're the ocean community, what should the ocean community's priorities be? And how do we join forces with the people who are thinking the Green New Deal and bring the ocean community into that? So I guess, my overall thinking for people, which I just think is a good ethic, is do not look externally. Do not think there's some people that are going to take care of this. The irony is that's just not how it's going to work.
There's no hero. There's no one who's going to save us. Movies really did us a disservice.
Yeah, all that is bullshit. It is all bullshit. There are no heroes. The funny thing is, you take that on the both sides, the way movies have done us a disservice and the kind of this Hollywood ethic on two angles is they've said there's this hero thing. They've also made it look as the villains are somehow kind of some monsters. The villains are these people with horns and fangs and are all these kind of evil kind of psychos. And if you actually want to say who are the villains, it's people with suits and ties. I mean, the key thing on this, what I say, is Bill Barr. Look at Bill Barr, the Attorney General of the United States. Every time they interview him, he's this kind of roly-poly, kind of your grandfather, uncle kind of guy. They, of course, because it's him, they always put him in front of some bookshelf or some fireplace or some crackling fire. The reality is, Bill Barr is one of the most evil people in the United States. You look at him, he's all kind of soft-spoken and everything. And again, the banality of evil. It's never some monster, some big thing. That's not what it is.
That's something that I wrestle with a lot now in terms of sustainability, because I feel like I'm thinking back, talking with you now again, I think back to graduating from Miss. What am I going to do afterwards? For a lot of sustainability students, it's go work at an oil company and do sustainability there and environmental impact assessments. And for a long time, there was this discussion about conscious capitalism. How can we make business green? How can we work this together? And I feel like something happened. I wasn't in the US, I don't know, but I feel like something happened where it became ridiculous to think that now. Maybe it's the climate strikes, the youth climate strikes, maybe it's Sunrise Movement, as you referred to, but it feels like, to me anyway, something has kind of profoundly changed in environmental discourse. Have you seen that? Do you know what that is? Is there something
Well,
happened?
I totally get what you're saying. And again, I don't think there's an answer to that yet. It's a work in progress. But, again, we just see Jeff Bezos, right? He just put out the $10 billion, the Bezos Earth Fund or something to that. Great. I don't want to put that down. I will probably go to Jeff Bezos Earth Fund and try to get money for our stuff. And then whether it's Elon Musk or all this, put this in perspective. This $10 billion Earth Fund is probably how much money Jeff Bezos has made in a stock returns of his own assets in the last 6 months. So again, as us regular people who $10 billion seems like a hell of a lot of money, what this is the stock appreciation of one individual in the last few months.
This is like a demigod.
Right. These are
giving us a little, tribute.
Exactly. That's a good way to think about it. What this is all these rich people just kind of throwing all of us peons a few coins for the masses. The reality is that, again, this is not the way forward. And again, it cannot be. It is not going to be the rich people throwing all us peons a few crumbs. That cannot be it. It has to be us, all of us, stepping up, and all of us filling the void, and all of us taking the reign. We cannot look to the billionaires of the world to throw some bones to the rest of us.
Okay. So, Jason, I think that's a good note to end on. There is no hero for us. We have to be our own heroes. If not now, then when? If not you, then who is kind of the phrase that's maybe kind of corny, but I think it's apt.
But it's true.
Corny, but true. Thank you, Jason, so much for taking the time with us to talk today. And I look forward to coming back and hearing more about the Ocean Action Plan. So keep us updated. And anyone who wants to listen to Jason's podcast,
Dispatch for Zombie Apocalypse, you can just Google that. And it's zombiedispatch.org.
Okay, great. And thanks so much, Jason, and see you next time.
My pleasure. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Cool. Thank you. That was fun.
I'm Nature Nate, and this has been the Waste Not, Why Not podcast, recorded in Aptos, Santa Cruz, and then later at Future Ward, a co-working space in Taipei, Taiwan, with a weird hole in the wall today. Do you have questions for us? Tweet them at us. We are on Waste Not Pod on Twitter, and our DMs are open. Not mine personally, but Waste Not Pod's. If you send me a personal DM, I will ignore it. Subscribe to our newsletter on Substack, where Alicia and I talk about environmental news and the latest updates on what's going on behind the scenes of the show. Sign up to Waste Not, a newsletter at wastenotwhynot.substack.com. Subscribe to our show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever. Give us a good rating to let us know you really care. I read them. And if you leave a review, it'll go into our Slack channel and I will read it. So be nice. Special shout out to Pic Collage for letting us stay. Thank you for letting us crush on your couch, Pic Collage. This has been a Ghost Island Media production. This episode was produced by Emily Y. Wu and myself, Nature Nate. Edited by Yu-Chen Lai. Fact-checking by Alicia Lee. Editing assistance by Angela Chow. Brand design by Thomas Lee. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye. Welcome to the past. Welcome to the old times. Hey, remember COVID? It didn't always used to exist. And we talked to my professor during that time.